On the afternoon of the 23rd of November 1991, the day before Freddie Mercury died, Peter Freestone brought some of his paintings into the room. Freddie Mercury looked at them. He said, "Oh, they're wonderful." And those were among the last words he spoke. Not about the music, not about Queen, not about the career or the concerts or the records, about his paintings, the things he had spent 10 years quietly and privately accumulating: the Japanese woodblock prints, the Art Nouveau works, the Victorian paintings, the decorative objects, and the porcelain, and the drawings were the last thing on his mind when the other things were ending. He had never spoken publicly about the collection in the way he had spoken about his music. He had never given interviews about what he was building in the rooms of Garden Lodge. He had spent 10 years acquiring and arranging and living with the art he loved, and he had never sold a single piece, and he had left it all to Mary Austin. And when Mary Austin finally opened Garden Lodge to the world in 2023 through a Sotheby's auction, what the world saw was not simply a collection of objects. It was 10 years of a private life that the public had never known existed. The most famous performer of his generation, alone in his house with his art, looking at things nobody watched him look at. The collection that Freddie Mercury assembled across the years he owned Garden Lodge reflected his aesthetic sensibility in the same way his music did, in its range, its theatricality, and its willingness to cross the boundaries between the serious and the decorative. The Japanese woodblock prints were perhaps the most consistent thread his love of Japan expressed in the ukiyo-e tradition, with its extraordinary precision of line and its quality of capturing fleeting beauty in permanent form. He collected Art Nouveau works, the aesthetic of the late 19th century that found beauty in organic form, in the curves of nature translated into decorative object. He collected Victorian paintings. He collected objects in silver and porcelain and glass, things that were beautiful and were the product of a tradition of craft he clearly admired, as he admired any form of making that required the complete expenditure of human skill. The specific quality of Freddie Mercury's art collecting that sets it apart from every other aspect of his public life is its complete privacy. He gave thousands of interviews across his career. He discussed his music, his taste, his ambitions, his aesthetic preferences in exhaustive and entertaining detail. He discussed his cats, his parties, his birthday celebrations, his love of Japanese culture. He almost never discussed his art collection, not in any specific way, not in the way that a person with a serious collection and a genuine passion for it might reasonably be expected to discuss it in the context of public life. He kept it inside Garden Lodge. He kept it for himself, for the specific pleasure of living with it, of walking past it every day, of having it as the context of his private hours. The collection was not an investment. It was not a status display. It was the specific accumulation of things that Freddie Mercury loved to look at, acquired over years, arranged in the house that was the most complete expression of his private life, and kept entirely separate from the public persona that the world knew. 10 years of quiet looking in private that the world did not know about until the auction in 2023. He gave thousands of interviews. He talked about everything. He did not talk about the art. He went to auction houses and galleries and dealers and bought things he loved and brought them home to Garden Lodge and arranged them and looked at them and told nobody who was not already inside the house. For 10 years, the most famous performer of his generation, alone in his house with his paintings, in a private life the public had never seen. The last words he spoke were about the paintings. Oh, they're wonderful. And they were. And the world did not know about them until Mary Austin opened the doors 30 years later. Garden Lodge at 1 Logan Place in Kensington was not simply a house. It was a total aesthetic environment, every object in every room chosen and placed with the attention of someone who understood how things looked together and cared about that understanding. The art was not hung the way a person hangs art who has bought things they like. It was curated, arranged in the specific sense of someone who understands how one thing changes another by proximity, what a space requires in order to be itself. Mary Austin, who lived in Garden Lodge with Freddie Mercury across the years of the collection's accumulation, has described the experience of living among the objects as living in a space that was the physical expression of a specific person's specific sensibility in the most complete form a private house can achieve. Among the most significant parts of the Freddie Mercury collection were his Japanese woodblock prince works in the ukiyo-e tradition. The ukiyo-e process, in which multiple blocks are carved and inked separately and combined to produce an image of extraordinary refinement, was a form of making that Freddie Mercury clearly found compelling, on the same terms that he found all extraordinary human craft compelling. He had visited Japan multiple times across Queen's career, described it as one of the places where he felt most himself, the country where he could be in public without the weight of British rock stardom. His love of Japanese aesthetic culture was expressed in the collection in a form more complete and more personal than anything he had said publicly about Japan. He bought the prints because he loved them. He kept them because he wanted to look at them. They were in the room when he died. The Art Nouveau works in Freddie Mercury's collection represent the specific aesthetic tradition that most clearly connects his private taste to his public persona. Art Nouveau, the style that emerged across Europe in the final years of the 19th century and the first years of the 20th, that found beauty in the organic and the flowing and the theatrical, is the aesthetic of excess and elegance combined, of the decorative taken to its extreme, and finding at that extreme a specific form of beauty that more restrained traditions cannot produce. Freddie Mercury's stage presence, the theatrical scale of it, the willingness to be extravagant, the specific quality of making the ordinary extraordinary through the complete commitment of every available resource, has the same quality as the best Art Nouveau. It is not excessive in the sense of being more than is needed, but excessive in the sense of being everything that is possible, which turns out to be exactly what was needed. He collected Art Nouveau pieces across the years, building a representation of the tradition in Garden Lodge that reflects a genuine understanding of what the tradition was doing, rather than simply an attraction to its surface quality. He understood the excess. He shared it. The theatrical excess of Art Nouveau and the theatrical excess of Freddie Mercury on stage are the same excess. The willingness to use every available resource. The conviction that the decorative is not less serious than the functional, that the beautiful thing made with complete skill is a serious act regardless of whether it is useful. He collected the art that shared his own convictions about what a person can make when they decide to use everything available to them. The collection was a mirror of the art. The art was a mirror of the collection. Both were him. The specific process by which Freddie Mercury assembled his collection is the process of someone who collected for the love of it. He visited auction houses, went to dealers, attended sales and previews, and made decisions about objects he wanted to own and look at. He was, by the accounts of the people who accompanied him, a serious and well-informed buyer, someone who had done the reading and looking that serious collecting requires. He knew the history of ukiyo-e printmaking. He understood the qualities that differentiate one Art Nouveau piece from another. He had looked at enough Victorian painting to have developed the discrimination of taste that comes from sustained attention to a visual tradition, private about the collecting, serious about the collection. The specific fact that Freddie Mercury never sold a single piece from his collection across 10 years of collecting is worth dwelling on, because it reveals the specific quality of his relationship with the objects. He was not collecting as an investment, not buying things with the expectation that their value would increase and that he would eventually realize the increase through a sale. He was collecting as a form of love, buying things he wanted to live with and keeping them because the keeping was the point. This is a different relationship with objects from the relationship that treats them as assets. It is the relationship of someone for whom the value of the thing is entirely in the looking at it and the living with it and the having it in the specific room where it belongs. He bought things. He kept them. He did not sell them. The collection at his death was the collection as he had built it, every piece still present, still in the rooms he had placed them in, still looked at by the person who had chosen them for reasons that had nothing to do with their financial value. Mary Austin received Garden Lodge and its entire contents when Freddie Mercury died in 1991. She continued to live in it after his death, surrounded by the objects he had chosen and arranged. She kept the collection intact for more than 30 years, did not sell individual pieces, did not disperse the collection in the ordinary way of estate management. She kept it the way he had kept it, in the house, in the rooms, in the specific arrangement he had created. The house, she has said, was a memory box, the most complete physical record of the person who had lived in it. When she sold the house in 2024 and the collection was dispersed through the Sotheby's auction in 2023, it was the first time the objects left the rooms they had occupied since Freddie Mercury placed them there. For 30 years, Mary Austin lived with the collection he had built. Every morning, the Japanese prints on the walls, the Art Nouveau pieces in their places, the Victorian paintings that had been there since Freddie Mercury hung them. 30 years of living with what he loved, in the rooms where he loved it. And when she sold the house and the collection, what left those rooms was not simply objects. What left was the specific physical arrangement of a specific private life, the 10 years of quiet looking that nobody had known about, dispersed finally into the world that had never known it was there. The Sotheby's auction in September 2023, titled Freddie Mercury, A World of His Own, was the first public dispersal of the Garden Lodge collection, and produced, for the people who encountered it, a specific kind of surprise. The bidders and the observers who saw the collection assembled for auction saw not the Freddie Mercury they had known from the stage and the records and the photographs and the documentary footage, but the Freddie Mercury who had spent 10 years quietly looking at beautiful things in the privacy of his own house. The Japanese prints, the Art Nouveau pieces, the Victorian paintings, the decorative objects, the specific taste and specific sensibility of a person who had been one of the most watched public figures of his generation, revealed in the privacy of what he had chosen to look at when nobody was watching. The auction raised over £40 million. The pieces went to buyers around the world, and the collection that had been assembled over 10 years and kept intact for 30 more was finally, and appropriately, dispersed into the world that had made it possible. "Oh, they're wonderful." Freddie Mercury said these words on the 23rd of November, 1991, looking at his paintings the day before he died. They were among the last things he said. And they are the most complete statement of what the collection was for him, not an investment, not a display, not a public gesture, a source of pleasure, things that were wonderful, things that he had looked at for 10 years and that had continued to be wonderful throughout the looking, that had not diminished in the way that things sometimes diminish when they are possessed for long enough. He looked at his paintings the day before he died, and they were wonderful. He had spent 10 years choosing things that would be wonderful to look at. He had chosen well. He had kept everything. Mary Austin had kept everything after him, and when the auction came, £40 million said that what he had found wonderful, the world found wonderful too. "Oh, they're wonderful." The last words about the paintings. 10 years of quiet collecting, not one piece sold. Mary Austin keeping them for 30 years. £40 million at auction. The world discovering that the most famous performer of his generation had spent a decade looking at things nobody knew he was looking at. The private life that was the other half of the public life. The rooms where Freddie Mercury was not performing. The paintings he looked at when the concerts were over. Oh, they're wonderful, and they were. Freddie Mercury spent 10 years collecting art. He spent them quietly, privately, in the specific way of someone who loves something for itself, rather than for what it can do in public. He went to auctions and galleries and dealers and brought things home to Garden Lodge and arranged them and lived with them and told nobody who was not already inside the house. He never sold a single piece. He left it all to Mary Austin. She kept it for 30 years. And when the collection finally met the world in the Sotheby's sale of 2023, what the world saw was the inside of a private life that had existed alongside the public one for the entirety of the years it was being built. The most watched man of his generation, alone in his house with things he found wonderful, looking at them in the privacy of his own hours. "Oh, they're wonderful." He said this the day before he died. He was right. He had always been right about what was wonderful. That is what 10 years of serious looking does. It makes you right about what is wonderful, and it keeps you right even at the end, even in the last hours, when the paintings are brought into the room and you look at them and they are still exactly what you knew them to be.